Thank you very much for having me here, and it's a delight and a pleasure to be here. I had heard quite a bit about how forward Dubai is in blockchain technologies, and it's right at the forefront with countries like Switzerland, the United Kingdom, and Singapore in adoption of blockchains. But just for my own quick poll, can I have a show of hands, just so I get to know the audience a little bit? Can I see a show of hands on how many people here hold Bitcoin? How many people here hold Ethereum? How many people here hold anything other than those two, the remaining coins? Fantastic. Okay, so this is great to see. This is a very, very savvy audience. I want to talk to you today about something new that we're doing. It's a new system called AVA let's see if it's projecting. Okay, it's a new system called AVA. It's based on a set of breakthroughs that took place over the course of the last year. This AVA is a new platform for creating digital assets and trading them in a friction-free manner. So one of the key features of AVA is that it's fast and scalable, unlike many of the technologies that you have seen in blockchains prior. It scales well with the number of users, and it scales well with the number of participants. It's customizable and modular. So what I want to sort of get across today is that finance is ripe for a disruption. There are many, many existing solutions, but there are many existing incumbents. If you look at the way we create assets, for example, the way we trade assets, in just about every particular on-ramp, there are incumbents that have cornered the market. If you look at the way we interface with our money, we go through banks, and since 1955, there have been very, very few things that have happened in retail banking that have actually changed the way we interface with them. The fanciest instrument that I can issue through my bank is a check, and if I want to get fancy, it's a post-dated check. And that's about the maximum that one can do. And yet what we are seeing with the blockchain technologies is the emergence of technologies like smart contracts that allow us to write very, very expressive, very complex conditions under which money gets transferred. And that has the potential to completely change the finance game. It has the potential to be an extinction level event for incumbents and a huge opportunity for newcomers. But the problem is the current offerings fall short, and they just can't deliver. The dream is strong. We've seen the glimpse of the dream with Bitcoin. But the technologies we have today cannot deliver this dream of a frictionless, open marketplace. And there are three reasons for this. The first one is that the engines are weak. If I look at Bitcoin, for example, the number of transactions it can handle per second is 3 to 5. About 3 to 5 is what takes place at a supermarket in Dubai on a weekend. That's about 3 to 5 transactions per second. So you cannot possibly entertain dreams of becoming a world currency at that speed. It's just not enough. And in addition, if I look at the latencies of transactions, for Bitcoin it's about an hour, what we call 6 confirmations. 6 blocks is how long it has to be before something is finalized. That is faster than how long it takes to send money within the United States, that's true. But it's still very, very long compared to how long it should take to just do a small, simple payment. If I use my credit card, it takes about 10 seconds, and one should be able to beat that with today's newest technologies. And yet the current blockchain technologies are just not there. They also are not there in terms of being inclusive. You and I can probably not take part in the Bitcoin ecosystem. We do not own mining rigs. We can be ancillary checkers of the ledger, perhaps. We could be validators, but we can't participate firsthand. That's very, very complex. It requires a lot of investment of mining rigs, access to cheap electricity, and has become essentially a big industry centralized in the hands of a very few number of miners, mostly in China. The second problem is that the network models are inflexible. They're not customizable. All of these coins have been designed to shill that coin. There is that one coin and the one network. The network implements the coin, and that's about all you get. You cannot introduce new assets. If you do introduce new assets, those assets are opaque to the underlying system. Bitcoin doesn't know that you're issuing assets on top. It doesn't know how to handle them specially. If you try to create a new contract for some kind of a derivative, some kind of a futures contract, or what have you, the Bitcoin system will not be able to validate that properly. And that's a big shortcoming. And the final issue is that all of these coins are typically static and unchangeable. They do need to be immutable. They do need to have nobody in charge. And the way they go about accomplishing those goals is by giving up any ability to change the system. So Bitcoin's, for example, Bitcoin's minting rate is something that was fixed by Satoshi in 2009. And that minting rate might well have to change. And in fact, for example, Zcash inherited the same minting rate, and Ethereum ended up fixing their minting rate as well. And both Ethereum and Zcash overmint today. They mint more coins than necessary, and yet they cannot change this. They lack the governance structures necessary to be able to adapt to changing conditions. In Ava, we're building a system based on a groundbreaking breakthrough, a new consensus protocol that fixes all three of these problems. We have a new engine that's drastically different in how it operates. We have a flexible architecture, and we have a governance model that's very, very different. The core engine that I will talk a little bit about is a big breakthrough in distributed systems, my own area of expertise. I used to be a professor at Cornell University, and the area that I work in, distributed systems, has been around for about 45 years. In those 45 years, about 35 of those were spent on a huge number of protocols that we call classical protocols. In 2009, Satoshi came up and said, look, all of this work that you did, this is all academic work. It doesn't work in the large scale, in the wide area network, on the internet, in an open system. And he invented his own protocol. Now, the problem with his protocol, I mentioned it before, is that it doesn't scale. It requires mining. It requires a leak of value from the store of value to the power companies. And so but that's all we had. That was the best we had until last year. Last year, there was a new protocol invented called Avalanche, and the Ava system uses that protocol. I'm not going to go into the technical details of the Avalanche protocol, but I will say something about its features. It has the feature that transactions are finalized within 1 to 2 seconds. So what takes Bitcoin about an hour, what takes Ethereum about half an hour to perform is something that takes the Ava network 1 to 2 seconds. That's almost faster than a credit card transaction. It's faster than a credit card transaction in the US. I don't know how fast those are around here. In Europe, they can be a little fast. But certainly in the US, it's a 6 to 7 second operation to validate your credit card. And here, it's literally within a second or two that the transaction is cleared, final, immutable. It has very, very high scale. So our testnet today achieves 5 to 10,000 transactions per second. So when we started down this path, people told us that we would never be able to compete with Visa. And Visa does achieve very impressive performance at 2,000 to 5,000 transactions per second. But this technology is able to surpass that. Now, there are other techniques that you could actually potentially use to get high TPS numbers. But all of them require one critical trade-off, which is centralization. If I ran the whole blockchain on my own machines, I could indeed get really, really large numbers. I could get numbers larger than what I'm showing you. But the third and one of the most crucial features of Ava is that it scales incredibly well in the number of participants. So this number, 6,000 transactions per second, is collected on a network with 2,000 participants. It's not a single machine. The Bitcoin network itself comes down to 19 mining pools. Ethereum is 37 mining pools. EOS is 21 validators. This is 2,000 participants in the system. So, and the cost to run the network, the leak of value from the system, is incredibly small compared to any network based on mining. The second thing I want to talk to you about is this flexible architecture. So if all I had to tell you was, hey, we have a new consensus protocol, it's much faster, I think that would be compelling, and the techies in the audience would get excited by it. But there is more here than just a performance play. The model, the network model, is different. This is a system built from the ground up for the creation of new assets by third parties. This is not something that is possible to do on Bitcoin because you can only create hashes in Bitcoin. And it's not something that is meaningfully doable in Ethereum even. You could issue tokens on Ethereum, what are called ERC20 tokens, but those tokens are opaque to the system. They are just code to the system. So what I mean by this is as follows. In Ava, the network model is not just I have a coin and I have a set of people who come together to implement a network for that coin. It is as follows. We do have a coin, but on top of that, you can have any number of other coins issued by third parties. And when those parties issue their coins, they get to determine their own scripting language, their own validation rules, as well as defining the set of nodes that are part of their network. So you could issue a new coin, let's say an oil futures contract. And you could say, look, I'm going to issue this here. It's going to obey the following set of rules. And the set of the state of this coin is going to be maintained on these particular nodes. Now, exactly how you'd specify it is you'd give them a color. You say, purple nodes get to hold this. Now, what are purple nodes? You define who gets to be branded purple. At that point, you could demand things from that set of nodes that are not present on the bare bones network. You can say, well, to be part of this particular network, you have to have a fast machine. You have to have a machine with extra resources like more CPU or more RAM. Or you can demand things that are social and legal. You can say, you have to sign the following agreement. And now suddenly, instead of blockchains being something external, extra legal, on the side of the current finance system, we have a system where everything is grounded in proper legal contracts all the way to the bottom. You can say things like, only whitelisted addressees can participate in holding this token. Or these nodes have to enforce a blacklist. And so that way, we have the ability to enforce local compliance rules on top of new coins issued on our platform. This is not something that any of the other 2,000 coins can say. We're quite late in this revolution. There have been 2,000 coins, and those 2,000 coins are all copycats of each other. They all converge to the same basic foundation. This is different, both legally and performance-wise. So, of course, having new assets and giving people the ability to create assets is exciting, but those assets would be nowhere if we did not have the ability to trade them. And to facilitate that, we have a best-in-class decentralized exchange built on top of the Ava platform. This particular DEX has the property that no other exchange can offer, even on Wall Street. Even traditional exchanges do not offer this. Namely, it gives you the guarantee that nobody can front-run your trades, even the people who are running the exchange. This is not something you get out of NASDAQ. This is not something you get out of NYSE. This is only possible because we're based on a cryptographic foundation. And in fact, if I take a step back and look at what happened in this space of blockchains, we invented this new asset. And then we keep going to Wall Street and saying, hey, would you please approve an ETF? And they keep saying the same thing to us. They say, look, your exchanges are not trustworthy. Your systems, your ecosystem is not trustworthy. They're open to manipulation. And that's all true. And this is, I think, one of the first times where we can say, look, by virtue of the way our tokens work, our systems work, by virtue of the fact that they're based on math and cryptography, we can build things on top that you cannot dream of on Wall Street. Wall Street is assured safe by audits and security checks, and every 5 to 7 years, there is some kind of a scandal involving some kind of an insider scam. This is different. It's correct by construction from the ground up, where the DEX proves to you that there is no way of anybody peeking at your order flow, jumping ahead of it, and giving you anything less than the best execution. So what does that mean for us? Well, if you are in the business of dealing with financial assets, or if you're in the business of holding anything of financial value that you could then turn into some kind of an asset, a virtual asset to be traded, this is a platform suited for you. So what you can do is you can take your asset, you can determine the set of rules that govern it, you can determine the set of nodes that hold it, and then you can issue it. Now, one of the exciting features here is that these assets create an internet of assets. The assets that you create could be traded with the assets that I create. Now, keep in mind, for example, it's useful here to contrast this to permissioned blockchains. I'm sure some people here have, how many people here are involved in a company that has done a proof of concept of a permissioned blockchain? That's quite a few. So, in fact, in the US, every top 500 company has done a proof of concept blockchain deployment. But none of them have actually deployed it. It's always been proof of concept and nothing else. The reason for this is simple. If you do a proof of concept and you gather together a consortium of people who hold your records and so forth, and she does the same thing, you have created two independent, non-communicating universes. And they just cannot trade with each other. Those assets don't talk to each other. Well, in this particular setting, they have the ability to be traded and atomically swapped. Those different universes communicate with each other. So we have the slider, essentially, that goes from permission deployments that you control all the way to permissionless deployments with the ability to have them communicate. Okay, so so along this, in this fashion, we did something interesting about 10 days ago. I was in Osaka for DevCon 5 at the Ethereum gathering, and we announced a spoon, a friendly fork of Ethereum. So Ethereum, as you well know, has its own rules, but has been limited to about 15 to 20 transactions per second. So what we did is we imported the entire Ethereum virtual machine into Ava in exactly the fashion I outlined below. And we created something that we call Aetherium. And it's just a copy of Ethereum, except it's on the Ava platform, and it's suddenly much faster. The underlying technology is capable of 3,000 transactions per second for this particular set. And with the EVM, going through the EVM, with the EVM slowdown, we are currently getting about 200 transactions per second. And, but one of the most important things we're getting is that interaction with the Aetherium world is near instant. You press a button and it immediately happens. No waiting for a block, no waiting for a 12.5-second block latency. And the same is true for any asset you could issue. So any one of you could issue an asset today, define the rules associated with it, and start fractionalizing that asset and start trading it worldwide without having to go through a gatekeeper. You don't have to go to a centralized clearinghouse. You don't have to go to a centralized market. You could just do it independently on a blockchain. One of the final things I want to mention is the governance issue. Every other coin has the property that at creation time, the creator fixes everything. And after that, it becomes unchangeable. And none of us have the ability to look into the future 10, 20, 30 years and pick economic parameters that make sense. We know very well that it's actually hard to do this just 3 months in advance, let alone 3 years or 30 years. In Ava, governance is different than everyone else. What we do is we open up key parameters of the system to control by the stakeholders. So it's the Ava stakeholders who can say things like, hey, we are minting too fast and we should slow down to boost the price of the coin. Or vice versa. We're minting too slowly. Let's mint a little faster to attract more people into the staking pool. And there are many other parameters like this, the minimum staking amount, the minimum staking period, the minting rewards, and other key parameters of the system are not cast in stone on day one and then stuck for thereafter, but they're subject to change by the token holders. So I just want to wrap up, I think I'm out of time, by telling you where we are. We started down this journey about a year ago, and we did a fundraise about February 2018, and we opened up our private testnet in May of this year. So that's a record level execution. I think in about 4 months we had the full system built and running. And we are currently about to do a public testnet. So we're about to open up our entire code base and invite people to experiment with it. We already did this with, we already opened up the Ethereum testnet, but not the code yet. So we have support for arbitrary smart contracts. We have support for asset creation. We have support for all of the things that you might have heard about, like multi-sigs, layer 2, and other things. So we're building up to a mainnet release next year. And we're very, very excited about the opportunity to partner with people who need high-performance, customizable blockchains. So if any of you are interested, I would love to talk to you. I'll be here both today and tomorrow, and I'm looking actively for partnerships with people with use cases. So on that note, I think I'm going to conclude and essentially tell you that we have a very fun crowd of people who are working on this, but more importantly, we have a very big user community that's very excited about the technological opportunities that this new approach represents. So with your help and together, I think we can reimagine finance across the globe and start issuing, creating, validating, trading new kinds of assets that the world has not seen, that takes finance into the hands of all sorts of people who are currently shut out of the system. Thank you very much.